Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Informed Chiropractor. This is Dr. Don MacDonald, your host. And again, we have been off the air for a bit. We have been so busy lately with our travel. We probably had the most travel in the first 6 months of the year than we have for any 6-month period up to this date. So it's been really cool. And as many of you in the past, we take the summer off. So the summer is mostly for us. We go to Vernon, we go golfing. We love a place called Predator Ridge. And we are going to be renewing our vows for our 25th wedding anniversary this summer. So we're going to have some fun there. I wanted to jump on though, because I wanted to talk about some of my biggest learnings from teaching the pelvic floor protocol. And this protocol has been such an evolving thing that just happened over the last, especially 6 months. It's just amplified the learning when I'm doing it myself, doing it with my practice members. I'm teaching our young associates it, and I'm teaching chiropractors it, and I'm getting feedback from everybody. It's just, the learning's been crazy. So I want to talk about some of the learnings from the pelvic floor work. And then I just want to talk about some of the chiropractors we've been talking to and some of the challenges that we have found. So the top 3 challenges that chiropractors have been experiencing, and they're all different kind of seasons of practice, but I kind of wanted to share that today. So we're going to talk about pelvic floor, then we're going to talk about the common challenges that we're finding just communicating with chiropractors from around the world. Like I said, this year we've already been to 4 countries speaking, and again, we love our tribe everywhere we go to hang out with them, and then it's great because then we can see similarities in whatever country you're from, and then we like to bring it back to you. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that pelvic floor thing, because I've had a few people ask and just go, what the heck, why did you even get into pelvic floor? And I'm like, good question. It's been a total, almost an accident, because since we started working with the polyvagal theory and really getting focused on the vagus nerve, understanding the vagus nerve is 80% sensory, knowing that the physiology is the neuroceptive response to our nervous system detecting the threat in our environment. Our goal is to create ease through the safety corridor. And so everything that I've been focusing on is what can we do to amplify the effect or amplify the ease in the safety corridor, because after an adjustment, it amplifies the regulatory effect on the whole nervous system. And these are the things that practice members will say, I've been adjusted by multiple people and there's just something different. Like it feels the same as getting adjusted by someone else, but I feel totally different after getting adjusted from you. And so I'm always trying to figure out what is that special sauce, or what is that something that you get adjusted by someone and it's just different, even though it feels like the mechanics are the same. And again, we've had interviews with Dr. Peter Gavorkian, who's amazing adjuster. And there are multiple factors. So don't get me wrong, there's never going to be just one thing. There's probably about 30 different things. And the more me and Brandy are like working with our young associates and just teaching other chiropractors, we're finding more and more the importance of nuance. I always think of it like pro golfer, right? When you're starting off with golfing, you're just learning the general swing. You're just trying to hit the ball. And then once you start to get really good, you're trying to put a fade on it. You're trying to put maybe you have to do a hook around the corner. You have to do a low shot because you got a tree ahead of you, or you got to do a sand shot, or you got to pop it straight up and then do backspin on it so that it doesn't roll off the back of the green, so it goes into the water. And so we are just learning about those nuances. And so I was just going to tell the story of how the whole thing started with the pelvic floor. And so I had a practice member who she's been with me for, I think, about 10 or 15 years. She's been under regular care. She's been doing great. And then one day she come in and she just was off, and I was asking her what's going on. And she said, just been kind of frustrated with my medical doctor, because she said, I think I'm having a prolapse. And then I said that to my medical doctor, and then they said to me, you're only in your 20s and you've never had kids, so it's impossible for you to have a prolapse. And she's like, well, I think I know my body and I think I'm having a prolapse. And so that was the biggest challenge at first, was the argument, until they finally actually took a look and realized that she was having a prolapse. And then she was also having some other issues. So then they end up sending her for an ultrasound. And when they did the ultrasound, they ended up finding out she had a 8 or 9 centimeter tumor on her ovary. And the great thing was it was benign. So that was good. But what happened was that this increased pressure from having this tumor in her lower abdomen was creating extra pressure, which was then causing her to get a prolapse. And so it was at the same time as that we were doing our level 2 MacDonald safety corridor protocol, where I was preparing slides and reviewing anatomy for the pelvis, for adjusting. So we do a lot of stuff this is from COVID, like a lot of stuff for hips, for protected hips, because a lot of femur heads in a protected position come rotated anterior, and then that increases the wear and tear, which is more likely to create degeneration. And then through COVID, I had a whole bunch of people who were on the list to get hip replacements because they were bone on bone, they like destroyed joints, and then they canceled all the surgeries for a year. And so all these things that have been challenged with the healthcare system, like in Canada, and I think a lot of other countries, United States is not so much, I don't think, because it's private, so you can get anywhere in as long as you have insurance or money. But in other areas with public healthcare systems, you don't have to pay for it. But the problem is the lineup is so long. So a lot of people are having challenges, and then they can't even get to see specialists for 6 months to a year. Or and then if they do have to have surgery, they can't wait for 6 months to a year. So there's just such a huge need to fill that gap because there's no other options for them. There's zero. So this practice member comes in and tells me, she says, I have a tumor and I have to wait for surgery and I can't even get into a surgeon for another 3 or 4 months. And then the surgery is going to be like 6 or 8 months after that. And it was at the time where I was just reviewing a lot of the visceral stuff, a lot of stuff with fascia through the abdomen, especially where the vagus nerve is surveilling for safety or threat throughout the physiology. And I was just doing some more anatomy stuff just of the whole pelvic floor because I was just starting to get more interested in that, realizing that the pelvis just has the three main joints around the pelvis. You got the pubic symphysis and the two SI joints, and we got the femur heads, and that's it for joints. And then we have all this fascia, which is just full of all the mechanoreceptors and all these little spindles and all these things that are telling your brain what position it is in space. However, the only way that's going to work is if it moves. And so I looked in and I could see there's this basically band of fascia that runs right through the bottom of the pelvis. And we all know that's called the perineum. And it's called the perineal body. And in my mind, I was like, that is probably in a super tight tone. And if that's a super tight tone, even through breathing, it doesn't move. And if it doesn't move, it can't withhold pressure if we have any intra-abdominal pressure. And if we can't uphold the pressure, and then we increase the intra-abdominal pressure, especially with this practice member with the tumor, then we are going to be pushing out the holes. And so that's why they get like a bladder prolapse or vaginal prolapse, or even bad, you can go through anal prolapse. Like any of the holes will get pushed through if the pressure's too much. And all the fascia around the pelvic floor doesn't have enough give and cushion in order for that to absorb the pressure. Now, not even just for the prolapse, because in chiropractic, we're about the nervous system regulation, but just as far as regulation for the nervous system, the pelvic floor is the base of the whole visceral cavity. And so if there's instability or the brain can't tell where it is in space because there's no information coming from it because it's not moving, that is a massive danger threat. And that danger threat is coming from the whole base, like we call it the basement of the safety core. There's going to be a limit to the amount of regulation you can get in the nervous system because there's always going to be a protective response. So because I had a great relationship with her, I'd said, like, I've been doing a lot more studying with the pelvis. I'm teaching these seminars, and I just think that it might sound weird, but if I can get some of the tension out of that perineum, like, of course, we're going to always do the adjustment first because we're always chiropractic first. However, the longer fascia has been restricted, the more sticky it is. And when you do an adjustment, take away the danger cue, it's still stuck. So it still needs something to help get it to move because it's been in that position for so long. It's almost cemented there, depending on what stage of stickiness the fascia is. And so I said, so in my mind, if I can get some pressure on here and release this, it might take the tension out of the bottom of the pelvis. And she was feeling lots of pressure right at the bottom of her pelvis, like constant pressure. She had to go to the bathroom she said she couldn't even go for more than 20 minutes or 30 minutes away from a bathroom because it felt like her bladder was spasming all the time and she had to go so much. So I said, you know what? I've never done this before and I haven't heard of anybody else who's done this before, but if you're willing, we can try because you're definitely not going to hurt anything. And she was like, oh my God, if you think you can even try it, she said, go ahead and try it. And so I started doing this work and we call it the 2-point perineal release on the pelvic floor after the adjustment. And it was crazy because after, I think I only saw her weekly because she's been in her care for a long time. So we kept seeing her weekly. And then I think it was within 4 to 6 weeks, she had stopped prolapsing. She was no longer prolapsing at all. And she hadn't even had the surgery yet and still had the 9-centimeter tumor on her ovary. So that is where the whole thing started. And since that day, I was just at the office today. And I was just adjusting someone and they were having a whole bunch of problems with their hip. And so I had done a bunch of different things. And the interesting thing now is that the perineal body, if you imagine, this is what it looks like in my brain, because I was thinking of it in cartoons. If you think of the perineum's like dead center bottom of the pelvis, fascia. And I think of the fascia being like a tree. So the trunk of the tree is right on the perineum. And then all the branches of the tree come up all through the viscera. They all go up around the hip flexors, all around the bladder, uterus, guy's prostate, all the way up to the lower part of the abdomen, and then all the way around into the pelvis too. And so I said, so if you imagine if there's constant torque or protection in that area, we're going to lose the springiness of our fascia. And I think I've already mentioned on here before, I always love, and I talk about it every seminar we do, is the kangaroo study, where they found kangaroos can run from 8 kilometers an hour all the way up to 16 kilometers an hour. And they can actually not increase their metabolic rate at all. And even sometimes it actually decreases, because when you have a healthy fascial system, fascia absorbs energy. So especially when the fascia is moving really smoothly, as we start to flex the muscles, just think of the fascia as an amplifier for the muscles. And I tell people before, it's like jumping on the floor compared to jumping on a hard cement floor compared to jumping on a trampoline. And when you're jumping on a trampoline, it takes a lot less effort to get the same function. And so that's what I'm finding through the pelvis. And so, of course, like all the crazy stuff, like urgency of urination, inability to control bowels or bladder, those are just obvious pelvic floor stuff. But there's other stuff like unstable low back, chronic tight hip flexors, chronic unstable low back, problems with the hip. Obviously, every single person who I've checked this with, that is either has degeneration in the hip, or is waiting for a hip replacement, or already has one, always has pelvic floor issues once you know the 3-part protocol, because it's just going to happen, because it's just a protective response in the nervous system. Anywhere from tight adductor pain right in the front of the pubic bone, like hip area, anterior upper quad, all the way down to the knee, and then even up to the rib cage too. So if someone's having chronic lower rib issues or lower rib cage issues, often that is held, because if you think about it, it's just like that core of the pelvis. And when that internal tree is just torqued, it just puts a bunch of tension throughout the whole rest of the nervous system. And even after we've adjusted them, we've taken away that threat response. And again, caveat, when they're younger, obviously their fascia is nice and springy, so the adjustment's just great on its own. Or if they're super active and they stretch a lot, they're usually pretty good as well. However, we just watched the Nadal, if you've ever watched that on Netflix, it's on Nadal's career. And at the end of his career, he was starting to get tearing of his hip flexor. And I was just like, oh, if you're an athlete, you should totally be getting the pelvic floor checked, because again, what it's doing is it's pre-priming all your fascia in the pelvic floor to amplify the function of all the muscles in your pelvis, amplify the movement through your pelvis. And again, that's the foundation of your whole upper body. We call it point zero. So if you think of that perineum as like the tent, upside down tent, that's like that point zero of the pelvis. And if it's moving, it tells our brain where it is in space, so that it can reposition that pelvis right underneath our spine. So again, with posture is a huge thing. A lot of the books I've read on pelvic floor, they say if you have poor posture, it's really hard on your pelvic floor. But if you get the pelvic floor to optimize, it will talk to your brain and you will get better posture as well. And yet, there's still lots of other things. Like we always talk about the ribs and the occiput and the upper cervical and the upper ribs. That doesn't change that at all. I'm just realizing how much of a hole there is in the healthcare system as far as this area goes. And even the last seminar that we did in Calgary, we had probably about 5 or 6 chiropractors that came that specifically said, because they felt like they had a gap in their tool belt for how many people they were starting to see who had pelvic floor stuff. And they felt like they had to refer them out to a physio. And then they still weren't even sure what the results they were getting. And so again, just increasing the skill in your toolbox is just massive. Coming into next year, I might just do something like online, because it is hard for some people to get in person. We have one pelvic floor seminar left this year in Denver on September 26th. So that's the only thing that I have on the books to actually go through so we can do it practical. I thought about teaching this online, and I will teach this online just to get the basic ideas around it. But again, you really need to practice, because a lot of these areas, these contacts are in delicate areas. As long as we explain it, we get consent, we get physiological consent. They understand why we're doing it, what the feeling's going to be afterwards, and they realize what the difference is afterwards. they're like, do that again. Cause they're like, they're in it to win it. The more I do it, the more I realize when people have chronic pelvic floor issues, the amount of havoc it creates in their life is insane. I have a patient, again, patient of mine for 20 some years. It's funny because as soon as you start to focus on one thing, people start asking you about it when it was just out of the blue. So I'd been seeing her fairly regularly for over 20 years. And then she just came and said, Dr. Don, I'm just having so much problem with my bladder control. Is there anything that you can do for pelvic floor? And so I'm like, actually, there is. We just created a whole 3-part pelvic floor. There's an anterior pelvic floor, there's a posterior pelvic floor, and then the saddle center pelvic floor. So the whole protocol is like a saddle where we're going to go right around that whole saddle area of the fascia and make sure that everything is, again, at proper ease so that the brain knows where the body's in space. So I started working on her. She was having a problem because she already had hip replacements. So her hips were already very tight. So she would have to get up in the middle of the night. She had to go to pee, and she takes a while to get up. So she can't just jump out of bed. So she would be getting up quite slowly. And because she was getting up so slow, she would never make it to the bathroom. So she's having accidents throughout the night. And she'd be going to have to go to the bathroom probably about 10 or 15 times a night, which is crazy because her bladder was basically in spasm. And so we started doing the pelvic floor stuff on her. And she's doing way better. And so as long as we keep it fairly regular, because she's waiting for another hip revision, because they had a hip replacement, and then the post is just slightly loose. And when this post is slightly loose, when you do hip replacement, especially the anterior quad and the pelvis is always just protecting that hip. So there's just a limitation to how much benefit they can heal afterwards because that post is still slightly loose. So she still needs to get a revision on this hip. So she said, it's way better. I now only have to go to the bathroom once or twice a night, and I can make it every time. And this is not after doing it for a long time. I think I've only been working on her with this for probably about 6 weeks. Caveat though, she's been under care for 20 years. So a person who's been under care for a really long time, or a chiropractor who's getting this, responds like insanely fast compared to someone who's never been under chiropractic care. So some of these stories, a lot of these really quick stories, are people who've been under regular chiropractic care because, yeah, you're different. When someone's under regular care, you can't compare them to regular people because they respond so much faster. So the funny thing about it is, so after just this 6 weeks, now she's getting prepped for this surgery. And so they had to do a full physical on her again. And she's like, Dr. John, can you even believe it? My blood pressure has all dropped. And I'm like, that totally makes sense. Because the apprehension of someone with that constant pressure in the lower pelvis, like 24/7, going to bed, being worried you're going to have to wear Depends or something, or you're like having accidents all the time, like insane stressful. Also too, we talk about social engagement in polyvagal theory, like people being connected and lonely. You want to see people who are isolated, people with pelvic floor, they don't want to go anywhere because they always have to know where the bathroom is. And again, I'll reiterate, I've been helping people with a lot of different things, not as severe as like incontinence and stuff like that. But it's just when it becomes that severe, it's just so obvious. It's crazy. So I don't know. I was going to just try to list all the stories that I've been having lately, but there's almost just way too many. But I wanted to talk one example of a chiropractor who came to one of our last seminars. And she'd been having lots of pelvic floor problems. And so again, a lot of people, the only option is you go to a pelvic floor physiotherapist. So she went to a pelvic floor physiotherapist. They did some internal work on her, and then they wanted her to do a bunch of Kegel exercises. Now, the problem is, and this happens a lot, when you don't have any movement in the pelvic floor, there's no interoception. So when they're told to do Kegel exercises, they can't even fire it. Once you get into this, you'll see the people who don't even know where their perineum is in space. They're trying to do a Kegel and they're flexing their neck and their shoulders. They're trying to flex their whole body because they can't flex in that one spot. And so she ended up just quitting doing all of it because she said it was just so hard. Like I felt like almost like incompetent because I couldn't do a Kegel exercise. And so we used her as an example when we're doing the third part of the pelvic floor, the 2-point connection, because there's just a series of actions we go through to reconnect the brain and the body and to retone some of those pelvic floor muscles. And it doesn't take long. Believe me, if someone comes in specifically with pelvic floor stuff on top of it, we're going to probably do an extra fee on top of it because it probably takes a little bit extra time. But it's just like anything, is that the longer they're under care, the less that we have to worry about that. So anyway, I worked with her And it took about 3 minutes. And we just kind of retrained her doing a Kegel. And I was just matching her pressure as we were going through this protocol. And she starts off with flexing her shoulders. And I'm like, no, we want to try to get closer right to that Kegel. You want to try to focus right on that perineum with that flex. Like you're trying to stop your pee or stop your poop. You're trying to stop that one spot without flexing anything else. Then she comes again and then she's flexing her whole abdomen. I'm like, that's closer. We're getting close. Abdomen and her legs and her glutes, like everything's all firing together. And then I'm like, okay, try it again. And now we're just feeling it in her stomach and in her glutes. And after about 5 or 6 different times, she got into flexing the right spot to make a Kegel and she could feel it. And it was crazy because she'd been experiencing this, I think, for over a year. And she was like, for the first time ever, she could actually feel the Kegel because it was like the brain was just trying to figure out where is that in space. But because there's such a lack of movement, it's like the message highway was empty, right? There's no movement, there's no message. And so she was pretty excited just that quickly. And then we had another chiropractor who I just checked her pelvic floor in Toronto in December and it just adjusted her. And she said she was having some problems. I knew there's some definite trauma and tension in her physiology there. Had some histories of miscarriages, stuff with trauma and family planning. And then she was just like, she said, after I got that adjustment, that benefit, I totally felt a huge difference in my pelvic floor for months afterwards because she's under regular care, right? So once you're under regular care, some of these things don't even have to be done on a regular basis. They just have to be done periodically. So just the list of people, we had a few people leave an email right afterwards that at the seminar, we kind of going over a few different scenarios that people might be experiencing. And there's tons of them. There's probably 20 of them. And then if you try to do this three-part protocol, this might help them out, right? Because again, chiropractic, we're not treating conditions. We're just optimizing the function of the nervous system. And again, the nervous system is still going to be in the fascia because the fascia is a connector to your nervous system. It is bringing tons of information to our brain. Like we said, the vagus nerve is 80% sensory, and it's just detecting all that fascia. And we had one girl who had just gone home, and she just tried it out with this girl who was having numbness in her leg through the S1 dermatome level for a long time. And she just did, after one visit, she could start to have the feeling come back. And I've had about 4 chiropractors over the last year come with the same thing, that S nerve entrapment through the obturator internus muscle. And when you take the pressure off that, they can just feel the leg again. When they thought it was a disc problem, it wasn't even a disc problem. It was just the soft tissue nerve entrapment. So anyway, it's just crazy. I'm just loving it. And I think a lot of chiropractors, when they leave, they're super happy because in a world like today, there's people are busy. I don't want to go to 500 different people for a whole bunch of different stuff. Plus I don't even know if it's that as effective because there's a lot of people who've done the pelvic floor physio and they already done all the exercises and they say, I have no problem contracting my pelvic floor. I just have a hard time releasing it. And again, chiropractic is getting the body back into a state of ease, which is getting the tissue back into a state of safety. And so that's what we focus about. So I'll just keep harping on this all the time. But if you can make it to Denver, that'll be the last time we're teaching it this year. But it's super cool. And then keep an eye out because I might try to do something online because I know it's really hard when we do 3 or 4 events in 4 different countries on a certain weekend and people are busy and stuff. So if you can make it, that would be great. Second thing, I just want to talk about some challenges and stuff that because we coach a lot of chiropractors. We've done a lot of one-on-one work. We have a 90-day program that we work intensely with chiropractors. And that's the biggest change that we create because for one, you have to know what's going on with somebody. You have to know what is actually the issue. The person has to actually know where they want to go in life. And then we have to keep them focused because again, a lot of people, there's a lot of distractions. So I just broke it down into 3 of the most common challenges that we're finding that a lot of the chiropractors that we're working with are having. And so the first one is there's too many options. If you open up any social media, there is no shortage of strategies and things you can do in your practice, right? Do you want to get a busier practice? There's about 8 billion things. There's never going to be a shortage. Now with AI, you can ask it and it'll give you a 360-day marketing plan. There's no excuse anymore to not know what to do that's effective or that you need to do. That's the whole challenge. But there's never going to be a shortage of things to do because strategy is no longer scarce because there's so many strategies out there, it almost becomes paralyzing. So The number one thing is that chiropractors, they don't even know what to do because they're drowning in so many options on what to do. Second thing is not knowing what season they're in. This is a huge one. And we're going to be doing this in our UNMastermind here in Lisbon coming up here in October. We're going to do a 6-week group program where we connect 2 weeks before to get really clear on what season people are in, what's going on for their practice, because we really want to find out what's the 1 or 2 things we can do that make the most difference, and then get rid of everything else. The thing, we got to prune away all the irrelevant stuff because there's too many people focusing on too many things, which are just distracting them. And then they're not doing anything because they're just doing a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of this. And so we want to find out what season you're in. So we have 4 seasons. We have the spring season where you're trying to grow your practice. You're a brand new grad, you have tons of debt, and you have no practice, and you need to grow. And so you need to pound the pavement. You need to get busier, right? Then you got the second season, which is going to be more of the summer. And the summer is going to be where you kind of get rolling. You're going to be like, now you actually hit your stride. Now you got to get more efficient with your procedures and policies and all that kind of stuff because you already have good patient flow. We're just trying to maximize the benefit. It's kind of like you're going from the minor leagues to the major leagues. Then you go to the harvest, the fall season, and this might be now you're getting associates. Now you're amplifying your effect. You got more people in your office who might be doing expansion, all that kind of stuff. And then you have the winter season, which is going to be more your legacy. Now, we're no longer doing things because we have to, we're doing because we want to. And so all 4 of those seasons are going to have different things that would be beneficial. And so sometimes people don't realize what season they're in. And this doesn't mean how long you've been in practice, because some people have been in practice for 20 years and they are still need to be in the spring season, because if they've never really kind of got their feet under them throughout their practice, they've never actually grown. They can't say, I feel like I'm in the winter season if you haven't saved up out enough for retirement, because it all depends on what your goals are compared to what is your reality. And Tony Robbins always says the definition of suffering is when your blueprint of what you think, where you think you should be, and your reality of where you actually are different. That's the definition of suffering. And so there's only 2 ways to fix that. And one is to either alter your blueprint or alter your reality. And so we're going to really focus on that UNMastermind, on making sure that we're going to have anything that's going to be a possible strategy is going to be aligned with the season that you're in based on your goals. Because again, we all want to serve everybody. That's going to be a constant thing. We want to be amazing chiropractors. We want to provide amazing healthcare to all of our people. But however, we need to make sure we look after ourselves. We're like the wine glasses at a wedding. We got to fill our glass first before we fill everybody else's. And so we got to really make sure we're in the right phase or season of practice, and also make sure that it's our decision. Not, I saw social media and I feel like I should be in this season, or I need to be, or I'm feeling pressure to be in here. It's more, what do I see that I'd love to do in my life, and pick it myself, right? So it's like really getting clear on what that is. Brandy's number one skill is discernment. And she's so good at actually getting to get the truth out of somebody of what they actually want. Because the most distracting thing you could ever have too is tricking yourself into thinking you want something and you innately really do not want something. Because that's going to be really torture, because you say you want something, but you innately don't want that. And then you're going to subconsciously sabotage it. And then you're going to try to achieve it. And it's just going to be super frustrating. And so we just want to clean that up, clean up all the crap, get down to what's actually important for you, depending on the season of practice that you're in. And then the third thing that we really find out is that I found this book, The 6 Geniuses of Business, and it's a really good book if you ever want to read it. But it just tells us that just like personality styles, we have different, we're going to call it our DNA. What's our natural DNA of business? There's 6 different traits. And if you can find out what trait, usually there's 2 top traits that you can do that actually fulfill you and give you energy and you're really good at. And then there's 2 that are usually you're not good at all. You're horrible at. And then 2 you can do, or you're competent at doing them. However, if you have to do that for a long time, it actually gets you burnt out and drained. So this is for any chiropractors that have been trying to grow their practice, but as soon as they hit a certain stage or certain busyness, they start to feel like they're burnt out. And that's because they don't have someone they can delegate to, or they haven't hired the right personality or the right trait to be able to take some of those things off your plate. Because if you're forced to go into a realm that is not that you're just competent at, but it's not super inspiring for you, you will always end up getting burnt out or get the what they call the Sunday night dreads about going back to the office the next day because you start to kind of get into that little bit of a rut. So the sweet spot that we want in practice is to get you good at what you're doing, get you comfortable at the role that you're doing, make sure that role is actually one of your strengths, and then you can delegate some of the other stuff that might not be your top strength so that you actually get fed from work so that when you do stuff by at the end of the day, you actually have more energy at the end of the day. And it just makes everything much more fun. And so the great thing about this Unmastermind is because again, we want to find out what's the most important thing. The worst is if you go to a mastermind and you don't really know what the most important thing is, and then you get a bunch of strategies on how to grow your business, and then you have no follow-up afterwards. So it's hard to stay accountable. And so what we're going to do differently is we're going to spend the first 2 weeks before we even get to Portugal, to Lisbon, to find out what we need to work on. And then when we're in Lisbon, then we're going to work on it and create the plan. And then we're going to have some follow-up with a group Voxer, and then a month after do a Zoom call. So we'll determine when that Zoom call will be in Lisbon, and then we'll come back. So there'll be a month later. So there's accountability after the mastermind so that we not only know what's the most important thing, what's the least amount we can do to get the most amount of effect, what's our 90-day plan, and is there anybody there to help support me and get me through the whole challenges, because there's always going to be challenges along the way. So I just wanted to jump on, tell you a little bit of what's going on with us. We're pretty much going into the summer season. So I might have 1 or 2 seminars here. The only thing that we'll be doing is Brandy's speaking at The Wave in Hayward, California at Life West in August. So if you are coming to The Wave, let us know. We'd love to hang out with you. We love hanging out with fellow chiropractors and getting some co-regulation. So I hope you guys are all doing well, and I look forward to talking to you soon, and maybe we'll see you on the road, or make sure you register. Denver, the last pelvic floor seminar, end of September, and Unmastermind, which will be in Portugal for a 2-day mastermind. So hope to see you guys soon.